together. And it came out actually, I mean, from a validation point of the importance of the Warwick framework and the Singapore framework, you know, this is only one example, and you can't draw any conclusion from this. But the notion of being able to take a set of Legos that represent a BibFrame Lite, you know, a core vocabulary that supports those patterns, layer them with a set of vocabularies that support the description of monographs, and layer that, the set of vocabularies that support rare books and manuscripts, and have that cascade very nicely, was a very powerful one for us. And it allowed us a great degree of flexibility and adaptation and customization, working with the data providers and the data experts to make quick changes and say, is this what you mean? And not have round, you know, monthly or weekly or yearly loops of that dialogue. Quick changes, 2, 3, 4 lines of changes to the rules, regenerate, is this what you mean? No, I meant it this way. And it became a very agile, very experimental, very fun process. And it was in part possible because we were able to use the patterns that we had in linked data, use some of the vocabulary that we had in BibFrame, layer these vocabularies based on what we learned from Dublin Core, and put these together into an iterative, agile process that we could work with the data experts and say, is this what you meant? That turned out to be an incredibly helpful and interesting and enjoyable process. We'll see where it goes. As we've been having these discussions with linked data, and as we've been having the discussions with BibFrame, and as we've been talking with libraries all over the world, one of the things that we basically were told pretty consistently is, what's the impact this has with me? How do I learn more about this? You tell me about these profiles, where can we go learn more about this? What does it mean? What does linked data mean? So we actually started a few months ago, in essence, a training offering around this. And these are the folks that are basically either have gone through the training or are currently going through the training. And the discussion that comes around in the profile is, how do I construct these? And we can give them a technical answer for that. The BibFrame specification that was cited on the Library of Congress site is an example of that. The challenge that we have in answering this question is that there is no social process we can point folks to. I want to build a profile of e-learning. Looking at you, Stuart. I want to build a profile around e-learning. Where do I go to do that? Right? There is an opportunity for the Dublin Core, not to create more elements, but to help communities come together and package these in a way that basically serves a particular purpose. Put a name to them and help people basically move forward. These ideas are permeating. These understandings, these practical applications are becoming increasingly clear. The question that is being asked is, how do I create these in a way that others will basically also find valuable? So let me go back again. These are some of the tools that, in fact, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. So one of the things that we do in this training is we give people tools. And these tools basically allow people to load or point at or upload or add data of their particular, that's in their repository, that's in their data set. Right now, basically, the idea is to sort of say, look, you understand your data better if you look at your data. And this tool basically helps them go from a set number of different kinds of formats into BibFrame and understand really what the implications of that are. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that because I'll run out. But one of the things that we sort of provided, first and foremost, when folks were sort of saying, look, I want to do the due diligence. I want to make sure nothing gets lost. I want to make sure that if I convert Mark to BibFrame, I don't lose anything, which assumes the fact that you know what the heck you've got. And here's, people don't. I mean, some people do. Where's Jackie Shea? Jackie knows everything that she has in her OPAC. She is remarkable in that regard. Where are you, Jackie? I know you're here. Anyways, if you tell her, she'll tell you what she's got, and it's quite remarkable. But for everybody else, what we gave is sort of a set of tools that helps basically say, look, this is the frequency distribution of the MARC tags that you're using. These are the kinds of information that you have based on the quantitative analytics of the fields that you use. So you can basically get a shape, an indication of whether you're using Roman or non-Roman characters by different kinds of mark fields that are being thrown in there. You can get a sense if you've got an overwhelming number of customizations by different kinds of 900 or X9 or 9XX kinds of fields. You can get a different kind of distribution depending on the kind of, are you using mark relator codes? And if so, what kind of frequencies? So this was really a way in which basically people could get a better understanding of this. And this was a way of basically showing what this data might look like in a linked data environment. But one of the things that it's also useful for is actually helping people understand, if I go from marked records into these linked datable resources, what does that really mean? So in this particular case, I'm loading close to 200 NLM records. I shred these into roughly 1,400 linkable resources. And helping people understand the notion of going from a record to a resource, this is a small but important step to help people go forward with this. So let me go back to this particular slide. The value of something is proportionate to the number of things that link to it. We are moving from 200 marked records into roughly 1,400 resources. The distribution of those resources is over on the left-hand side. This is just an example of somebody's data. I'm breaking this into topics. I'm breaking this into people. I'm breaking this into organizations. I'm breaking this into places. I'm breaking this into genres. I'm breaking these into collections. I'm deconstructing mark records into these kind of linkable assets. We're not talking about linking mark records together when we talk about linked data in libraries. We're talking about linking to the resources in which the mark records are in fact hiding. And in the process of linking to those resources and building off of each other's links, we're talking about increasing the visibility of these things far more than we could have ever imagined. So I want us to stop thinking about, I don't really care if we think about records or resources. I'd like us not to talk about triples. But what I want us to start thinking about are things that we can link to and ways in which we can make those linking easier. And ways in which we can make the trusted assets of the linking things that we've got not only more linkable, but more trustworthy in a larger network environment. And to move from an identifier land grab where it's just pointed at things that are easy to new ways in which we can basically make our identifiers as easy to link to as everyone else's. Google Refine, just a tool. This is a tool everyone should basically play with, folks. All right? This is, sorry, it's Open Refine now. I'm sorry. My bad. It's a data cleaning tool. It helps you clean up your data. It's actually really, really, really helpful. But one of the things that it basically provides is the ability to do reconciliation. I've got a spreadsheet of authors. In essence, I want to basically normalize the names around those authors. Or I want to get additional information about those authors. I know that this is in fact a person's name. It's not a spreadsheet in a column that's just a text. It's a person's name. I want to basically match those against authority files and get more information about them. This is a tool that allows that kind of reconciliation to be possible. Our authority services don't interface with these kind of tools. We don't make it easy for these kind of tools to in fact actually get used. We don't make it easy for our identifiers to be used by these kind of tools. This is a prototype that we developed a while back to help sort of, describe the art of the possible of what cataloging environments might look like in a more linked data space. You type things in, and basically it queries across dozens of different authority services and help you match the term that basically makes sense to you. So I'm typing carcinoma, and basically I'm getting hits back from Agravoc, which is the FAO's linked data service, and OCLC's FAST service. Just an example. We're working right now with the National Library of Medicine to help them put on place MESH as a linked data service. So now if you start typing carcinoma, you'll actually get more MESH terms as well. We're working with the World Health Organization to help them put up ICD-11, which is the International Classification of Diseases. Start typing these things, you can basically start hitting it. We, as a community, are building up these wonderful identity services. But we as a community are doing a horrible job of letting people link to those identity services that we are creating. We love identifiers more than any other community I've been able to work with. And yet we have this tendency to try to put up, extraordinarily high barriers for this. If you only use our API, our API is the best. Okay. But best is the enemy of good. And right now, good goes a long way. So what we're trying to do, and what I think is another opportunity for the Dublin Core, is to help identify these patterns in these linked data solutions, these partial solutions, and recommend best practices and best ways in which these kinds of things can be linkable. They're almost micro patterns. We're not after full-blown vocabularies here. We're not after full-blown descriptions. We're not after, over-engineered solutions. Just small patterns to say, this is how I would link to a resource. And these are the kind of simple APIs that basically go a long way. There's nothing wrong with building additional, richer APIs on top of that. There's nothing wrong with basically also providing your custom APIs that do amazing things for your customers. But simple patterns go a long way in making your data more linkable. If we look at then, in the context of the invisible web and the standards and the technologies and a lot of the infrastructure we've got in place, if we look at this from sort of a purpose and promise standpoint, as we started out, the web has both purpose and promise. From an invisible web standpoint, from a library linked data standpoint, at a certain level, the purpose of BibFrame is to replace MARC. The promise is in fact so much more. The purpose is in fact serving libraries. The promise is in fact extending beyond libraries to related memory organizations, the vendors, up and down the food chain, and ultimately, frankly, the users in which they serve. It is not an us versus them proposition. We are not making this data and then throwing it over. Our users are valuable contributors to this space. I have a problem of collecting vinyl records. That's the first step of 12 one takes, is to acknowledge that problem. The data that comes from the library about music is not to the level of detail that I find useful in terms of my interest in finding stuff that I want. I'm interested in any vinyl record that was recorded by Rudy Van Gelder. Anything he's done. Gospel, jazz, I don't care. One of the best recording artists known to man. That information is hidden. If we, as a library community, make that information of just the albums that are available, there are thousands of people that would just love to add value to that data and basically help describe those resources in a way that myself and others would find really interesting. The point is that this is a cooperative opportunity for us, not only to work within and across memory organizations, but in fact, the users in which we serve as a way of contributing back. So the purpose, again, from BibFrame in the context of leveraging existing web standards to speak with a consistent voice. The promise is about bridging the visible and the invisible web, about exposing our assets in a way that the web understands, about exposing our assets where the users are. All right, so I got a few more minutes and I'm just going to wrap up in the future. And I always like this. Frankly, anyone that basically says what the future looks like, I don't really trust them. So, with that caveat, you should probably not trust me. But I'm going to offer something nevertheless. And I'm going to say what the future is at a certain level. We as an industry have done a tremendous amount of things, but this is one of the things that I don't give us high marks for right now. For the past 20 years, we have been basically talking about the ability of surfacing data on the web, about making it easier for folks to find things, making it easier for folks to discover our assets, and we haven't done an extraordinarily decent job of this overall. A for effort, that our execution we could improve on.